Okay, so this is going to be your engine component pre-trip inspection. We're going to start on the passenger side first, because typically there's only 3 to 4 things to point out over here. Then we spend the rest of our time on the driver's side. So on the passenger side, I'm going to start with all my general hoses. All my general hoses are properly mounted secured on each end. They are not cracked, bent, or broken, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and they are not leaking. Next, I'm going to point out my belt-driven water pump. To find that, look at the coolant reservoir, follow the big rubber hose on it all the way down, and you're going to see it connects to this piece right here. So this is my belt-driven water pump. That's properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not leaking. Next, I'm going to point out the serpentine belt. That's located right up front. My serpentine belt is properly mounted secured, not ripped, torn, or frayed, and has no more than 3/4 inch of play. Now we're ready to move on to the driver's side. I hate you, Michigan. So, once on the driver's side, again, we're going to start with all of our general hoses. All my general hoses are properly mounted secured on each end. They're not cracked, bent, or broken. No abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and none of them are leaking. And this is where I start my Z formation. The reason why I call it a Z, because it kind of looks like a Z when I do it. I start from up here, work my way back this way, back over this way, and then back down this way. On the smaller trucks, everything's more compact, so it makes one hell of a Z, but it still follows the same path. So, starting at the top, I'm going to start with these 3 reservoirs together. I got my coolant reservoir, my power steering reservoir, and my engine oil intake reservoir. All 3 of these are properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not leaking, and filled to manufacturer specifications. Next, I'm going to point out my engine oil dipstick, located right here. This is properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and this is what I use to check my engine oil. Next, I'm going to point out my belt-driven alternator, located right here. That is properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And if you're wondering how to find the alternator, this one has a more open case, so you're going to be able to see these coils right here. The other one has a closed case. It's going to have 4 holes in it. One here, one down here, and one down here. You can look through one of those holes and see these same coils. That's how you find the belt-driven alternator. Okay, so next, we're going to point out our gear-driven parts. So back here, I got my gear-driven power steering pump right down here, and my gear-driven air compressor is right on top of it. Both of those are properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. Next, I'm going to talk about my power steering lines. My power steering lines are properly mounted secured on each end. There are no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and they are not leaking. And on a side note, to find your gear-driven power steering pump, it's actually real easy. All you got to do is find your power steering line that leads back to it. This line, if I follow it back, it leads straight up to that gear-driven power steering pump back there. And you're welcome to hop up in there, just watch your legs and stuff, or whatever. So you can see that power steering line right here leads straight back into that gear-driven power steering pump.
What'd you say was on top?
This is going to be the air compressor. And to find out if it's an air compressor, you can follow your air lines like this one right here. And you're going to see that that air line hooks up somewhere up here. So gear-driven air compressor and power steering pump are right back there for this truck. They're not always in the same spot. It varies from truck to truck. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the power steering gearbox, or you can call it a gearbox. So my power steering gearbox is properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not leaking, and none of my bolts are missing. And I tell students, use this as your halfway point. Double check your work up here to make sure you didn't forget anything, and if you feel confident, keep moving on. So we're going to keep moving on. So I'm going to go to the next piece connected to this, which is my arm, pitman arm, drag link, and tie rod. Or you can call it my arm, my link, my rod, and I'm also going to point these out with it. Castle nuts, one right here, and cotter pins, one at the tip of this one and one at the tip of this one. So all those together. Those are all properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and nothing is missing. Next, behind my gearbox, I need to point out my leaf spring mount. So I got my leaf spring mount and my U-bolts. They're shaped like the letter U. So my U-bolts and my leaf spring mount are properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. Next thing I'm going to point out is my leaf springs. My leaf springs are properly mounted secured on each end. They are not cracked, bent, or broken, and they are not shifted or missing. Next thing I'll point out is my shock absorber. My shock absorber is properly mounted secured on each end. It is not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking because it has fluid in it. After I point out my shock absorber, I'm going to go ahead and move over to my brake line. My brake line is properly mounted secured on each end. There are no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and it is not leaking. After that, I'm going to point out my brake chamber. My brake chamber is properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and not leaking. It's not on this truck, so I'm not able to show you at the moment, but in front of the brake chamber at all times when you have it, you're going to have a slack adjuster and push rod right here. So my slack adjuster and push rod are properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and there is no more than 1 inch of play with the brakes released. Next, we're going to move into the brake drum. It's the whole inner lining of that metal. My brake drum is properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and it's free of debris. Next, we're going to talk about the brake shoe, which is the padding. My brake shoe is properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and there is no less than 1/4 inch of material. And I'm pretty sure this one has disc brakes.
Yeah.
But on your test truck, it's going to have a brake shoe. So the brake shoe is what kicks out towards the trunk. Okay, so we finished everything back here. Double check your work after you do the brake drum and brake shoe. Make sure we hit all this. We did. So we're going to go ahead and keep moving on out. Now this is my steer tire. For this piece of rubber alone, I have 6 things to point out. The 6 things I'm going to point out for it, I do in this order every single time. So my steer tire is properly mounted secured. No abrasions, bulges, or cuts. It is worn evenly across. There is no less than 4/32 tread depth. It is filled to manufacturer's specifications, and it is not leaking. That's the 6 things you got to say for this piece of rubber. Next, we're going to move on to the rim, or the wheel, whatever you want to call it. My rim is properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, free of illegal welds. Next, I like to do my valve stem so I don't forget about it. If this guy ends up down here, a lot of people end up forgetting about it because they don't see it. So every once in a while I tell you guys to take a step back, look at everything so you don't forget anything. Valve stem. 5 things to say for this little guy. Properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not leaking. My cap is on tightly, and this is what I use to check my tire pressure and fill my tire pressure back up. Next, we're going to talk about all of my lug nuts. All of my lug nuts are properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. None of them are missing, and there is no silver threads or rush trails which would indicate looseness. Next, we'll talk about the wheel hub. My wheel hub is properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not leaking, and filled to manufacturer's specifications. Now, there's something I want to point out while we're up here. I consider this my gold star. The reason why I call this my gold star is because I compare the drive tires to the steer tires and my tandem tires to the drive tires. So if I miss a valve stem, let's say I missed the valve stem, how many tires are on this truck? And that includes the trailer as well. 18 in total. So that's 18 points off if you miss. That's because they each have a valve stem. Keep that in mind. So you miss something crucial up here, you're going to miss it for the rest because we do comparisons. So what I'm trying to say is, gold star this. Don't miss a single thing. Tires, brakes, and suspension. Total bullshit is what we like to call it. Make sure we get 100% all up in here. So now that I hit everything right here, I'm ready to keep moving on back. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start with my mirror and my door. My mirror and door are both properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And my door opens and closes freely. Next, we're going to go ahead and talk about my door hinges. My door hinges are properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. Next, we're going to talk about the weather stripping. I got weather stripping on the door, and I got weather stripping on the inside as well. So my weather stripping is properly mounted secured, not ripped, torn, or frayed. Now we're ready to keep moving on back. So we're going to go ahead and point out the steps while we're up here. My steps. And my steps for my catwalk. So I got steps up there, steps back here, my catwalk, and my drive shaft, which is actually further up that way, but it's a big bar going down the middle. So if you want, you can hop up here as well. Just grab that handle. That's the drive shaft. Oh, there it goes. So steps, catwalk, and drive shaft all together. Properly mounted secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And all of these are free of debris. Now, you guys are welcome, just to let you guys know, you can stand up here and do your pre-trip. There's nothing against you standing up here if you want to. But, I don't really need to, so. Go ahead, pop back down here. Put things out for you. So after you do your steps, catwalk, and drive shaft, I'm now going to work on my exhaust. So there's two places in which you can point at it. This is my exhaust right here. Or if you want to hit it from up here, that's fine. You just got to make sure you point past the drive shaft, right down here. So my exhaust, properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And there are no soot trails which indicate a leak. You want me to point out again?
Oh no, I was looking at the difference.
So, exhaust. Now I did my exhaust, I'm going to move on to my frame. My tractor frame is properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And it's free of illegal welds and holes. Next, don't want to forget about it, this one's hidden. But on your test truck, it won't be. And here I have my fuel tank and my fuel cap. So both of those, fuel tank and cap, are both properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not leaking, and my cap is on tightly. Now we're ready to talk about my danglies. I like to start with the airlines first. That's going to be the blue one, and on this one, I'm getting confused. So the blue one and the black one on this one. So my airlines, those are properly mounted, secured, and that will be on both ends because it's going to be hooked up right here, and it's going to be hooked up back here. So my airlines, properly mounted, secured on both ends. There are no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and they are not leaking. Next, I'll talk about the Glad hands. These are my Glad hands and my Glad hand mounts. These are the mounts. So my Glad hands and my Glad hand mounts are properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and they are not leaking. Next, I'll talk about my electrical service line. My electrical service line is properly mounted, secured on each end. It's going to be hooked up right here. So, electrical service line, properly mounted, secured on each end. It is not ripped, torn, or frayed, and there is no exposed wire. And most importantly, all of my lines are free of the catwalk. The reason why we have to make sure of that is because if this line was to hang down here when I'm making a turn, there's a good chance this is getting ripped straight off the trailer. So if a blue and red line got ripped off at the same time, you just lost all your air supply to the trailer, and the brakes are going to lock up. Okay, so we did our danglies. Now we're ready to keep moving on back. We're going to start with the bulkhead first. My bulkhead, properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and it can support a load. My splash guard and my mud flap are both properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And here's that TBS to TBS I was talking about. So this is where you're going to do that comparison. It's going to sound exactly like this. I am now going to inspect my drive, tires, brakes, and suspension the same way I did my steer tires, brakes, and suspension, except for 5 noticeable differences. Number 1 is right in front of your face. It's going to be the tread depth on these. The tread depth on these tires can be no less than 2/32. Number 2, I'm going to choose to do the airbags. My airbags are properly mounted, secured, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and they are not leaking. Number 3, I do the dually spacer. My dually spacers are properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and free of debris. Number 4, my spring hanger. This piece here, spring hanger, is properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And number 5, my torque arm. There's one on this truck because it has 2 sets of dry tires. You got a torque arm here. This is what the torque arm looks like. And there's one that's just like it back here. So I got 2 torque arms for this type of tractor.
Point that again.
So this is my torque arm. On your single drive tires, single axle right there, you're just gonna point back here. So, because this one has dual sets of drive tires, that one only has a single set of drive tires. So, torque arm, properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And that's my 5 noticeable differences. Now, a lot of people almost forget this, so don't forget about it. We still have a coupling system to do, because typically you can't see all this because it's going to be coupled together, but we still got to point it out. We're not going to uncouple the truck for it. We can point it out as it's hooked up. So, first thing I'm going to start with, there's 6 things to point out down here. I like to start with the release arm first. So, the first thing I'm going to point out is my release arm, properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and it is in the lock position. Second thing I'm going to point out is my platform, or you can call it my skid plate mount because that's what it's mounted to. My skid plate's mounted to. So my platform is properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. None of the bolts are missing. I'm going to point these 2 things out together: my skid plate and my trailer apron, which is the metal sheet at the bottom. Skid plate and trailer apron are both properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. There is no gap between the 2, which would indicate an improper coupling, and my skid plate is properly greased. Really?
Yeah.
I've seen take off. I have no idea, honestly. Sorry about that. And then the last two things, so we pointed out 4 things so far. The last 2 things we're going to point out are the kingpin and locking jaw. So you're going to be able to see it because it's uncoupled. If you can't see it, you just point towards the middle. So this is my kingpin, and my locking jaws are right in the middle of this. So my kingpin and locking jaws are both property minus secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and the locking jaws are secured around the kingpin. And that'll be my 6 things for the coupling system. Now we're going to keep moving on back. So like I said, if this was coupled together, that means this is going to be fully raised, so it's going to sound different, even though it's all the way down, if it makes sense. So landing gear, crank arm together are both property minus secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. My landing gear is in the fully raised position, or would be if it was coupled, and my crank arm is in the cradle position. We're going to keep moving on back. My trailer frame and all my cross members. So trailer frame and cross members are all property minus secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and none are missing. Now that I got back here, since I'm already walking past this, I like to start working with this first. So I'm going to start with my tandem release arm, my tandem locking pins. There's one right here to point at, and there's one back here to point at. So my tandem release arm and tandem locking pins are property minus secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and they are all in the locked position. Next, here's that comparison one more time. So these guys showed up late to the party, so all you got to say is total bullshit, total bullshit. So it's going to sound like this. I will now inspect my tandem tires, brakes, and suspension the same way I did my drive tires, brakes, and suspension. Thanks for showing up. Mud flap, property minus secure, not cracked, bent, or broken. And on your test, you're actually going to have swing doors. You're not going to have a roll-up door, so we can look at that green trailer if you want. So on the back of that green trailer, I'm going to start with all my hinges first. All my hinges on the outside are property minus secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, none are missing. Both of my swing doors are property minus secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and they open and close freely. Both my arms, which are the bars going from top to bottom, my arms and the latches are property minus secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and my latches are in the latch position. And finally, my tie backs, the chains dangling. Can you see them right above the license plate? So my tie backs are property minus secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and they are not missing. Now, to end this pre-trip off, I want to make sure I say this, otherwise I'm going to get marked down for this entire side. So, to end it off, you want to say this. I will now inspect my passenger side as I did my driver's side. This will conclude my engine component pre-trip inspection.